Bienvenue au musée de la BNF. Je suis Emeritus Coquery, le directeur du musée de la BNF.
I'm the director of this museum. This is the biggest room in the museum. We have a sample of wonderful treasures within the French National Library. It's like the setting for the million items of extreme interest here. Here we have exhibited the most beautiful treasures. And in the room of columns here, we have cameos done by modern goldsmiths. So we have these gems, but also book gems, if you will. We also have photography, opportunities to study and date all these artifacts. And so this is all very recent here. It was inaugurated only 2 years ago. The National Library, or the Royal Library in the day, was opened in the 14th century, but as early as the 18th century, the general public or amateurs could come and examine these treasures, gems, other artifacts and manuscripts. And for the last 2 years, as I was saying, in this refurbished room, the general public can come in and enjoy and discover all these wonders. We're absolutely delighted to be working in conjunction with the School of Jewelry Arts. We worked on a major document that features on our website, and this will offer you a raft of different material, articles, videos, podcasts that were put together jointly with the School of Jewelry Arts expertise in conjunction, as I say, with our departments here, the multimedia department, and also our researchers, offering, I think, a layout here that I think you probably agree that will meet with the satisfaction of all people interested in jewelry and literature, because we wanted to interlink both for our library here. It's not just gathering together a pile of books like any old library, but here we have treasures here. It's a museum here of artifacts, linking together, as I say, the imagination surrounded by jewelry as well as books. Yes, good evening to one and all. My name is Emmanuel, and I'm responsible for research here at the School of Jewelry Arts. And first and foremost, I'd like to pay heartfelt thanks to Emmanuel for welcoming us here in this absolutely wonderful location. I would urge you to come and visit it yourself when you have time. My thanks also go to the School of Jewelry Arts, established in 2012 with the support of Van Cleef, and the vocation of this school is to make available to the general public gems and jewelry culture. So, of course, all this is about offering an open door into culture without any prerequisites, and references made to this website. This website content is something you can see here on the screen. It's beautifully illustrated, and it really embodies for us this evening our conference talking about artistic resonance and literature in conjunction with gems. So this scientific work was done with Charline Coupeau, who worked with Constance at this library, the National Library. Charline is addressing herself to a vast subject here, and this over a 3-year period. The gem as seen in literature, literature as a gem, and encounters, if you will, revolving around gems and jewelry. So I'd like to underscore to what extent jewels and literature are easy bedfellows. A word can be seen as a jewel, and a sentence is put together like a goldsmith, and you can see it the other way around, that a gem is something, what's the initial cultural or artistic form. And so it prompts you to think, what is a sign or a form that is meaningful? I would say that something can be reflected in the brilliance of a gem. So perhaps I can hand over to Charline and Patrick. Yes, good afternoon to one and all. Thanks very much for joining us this evening in this absolutely fabulous location, the gallery of the columns. So thanks to Emmanuel Cochry and Emmanuel Emeritus for her introductory comments. I'm with Patrick Wald Lasowski, who is Emeritus Professor, specialist in the 17th and 18th century literature. He's a writer and an essayist. And we're here this evening to offer a discussion, a conversation, as you would have understood, a conversation linked to a topic that is dear to our hearts for a number of years. In other words, these echoes, this resonance, if you will, between jewelry and literature. The idea for this evening's event is to have you travel through time, through these jewels and gems. And literature, of course, it's worth remembering that irrespective, at the end of the day, the literary genre, be they tales, novels, myths, poems, or short stories, the jewel or the gem, for that matter, are very much present in the body of the text. They offer the structure of the literary artifact. The gem is here we have a gem, if you will, that it will be part and parcel of the mystery of the fascination flowing from literature. And when a gem is more subtle, more discreet, in the margins, in the wings, nevertheless, it's part of the center stage creation of an imaginary world and sparking the interest of a story and its adventure. So this evening we've decided to celebrate literature, to have literary texts and pictures resonate. So this is what it's all about, to kind of honor, if you will, literature, but through the prism of some extracts that we'll be reading out, excerpts from French classical texts, because we've really tried to cherry pick some telling examples that will help you really have a genuine insight into how gems, how jewels are very much involved in generating a universe of meaning, of how to generate magic, and also sometimes to actually extend the pleasure that you may have from reading the text. So we can't be exhaustive, obviously, on such a vast topic, as you'll appreciate, but we will be, as I say, diving deep into a short repertory or panorama, if you will, of text. And we'll be starting, if you will, with the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages is a point in time where we see courtly love emerge. This is all about sensitive elegance, the passion of knights to service of their lady. It's also a period where we see the fantastic, the fairy tale, and the development of a raft of literature which will show great interest in the virtues, the properties of precious stones, linking in with the lapidaries. And these lapidaries will be developing a whole language about the magical properties of gems, which will be a source of inspiration in its turn for courtly literature and knights' tales, where we'll be able to see a certain type of gem, rings in this particular case, and these rings will have gems set in them that sometimes are magical. So Patrick, could you offer us some insight on a particular text in this period, but it really echoes with what I've just laid out? Yes, of course, Charline. These chivalric novels are extremely rich in terms of the imagination, in terms of the magical sphere and which will be interlinked with the gem, and particularly the ring, because the ring is a gem, if you will, is a precious object, which is essentially linked in with the novel world. And so I'd like to refer you to Lancelot and the Knight of the Cut, written at the end of the 12th century by Chrétien de Troyes. So you'll see in this excerpt that the ring plays an important role. Let me quote, "But the one I have to tell you about most of all wore a ring on his finger, whose stone possessed such power that no enchantment could resist it when looked at. So he put the ring before his eyes, stared at the stone and said, 'Lady, lady, God help me. I am in great need now that you could help me.' And the lady in question was, in fact, a fairy who had given him the ring and raised him as a child. He had absolute confidence in her that wherever he was, she would help him. But he could see by her call and by the stone of the ring that there is no enchantment here, and he must recognize that they are locked up and imprisoned." Thanks very much, Patrick, for reading out that excerpt from Chrétien de Troyes' text. So, why the ring then? Why the ring, and why do we find it in these chivalric novels? We can see it in this particular excerpt you shared with us, the adventures of Lancelot, but it also, or the figure of the ring, if you will, also appears in another Chrétien de Troyes novel. It's Yvon. We also have Tristan and Iseult, and the rather forgotten love story with Edouard and Amadas. So what does this ring tell us, if you will, when we find it in these types of texts? Now, all the examples that you just referred to, which are extremely numerous, actually show how powerful the ring is in the medieval mind and how important it was. Their symbolic potency is huge, be it sacred or profane, luxurious or done in very simple materials. The ring has a social function, but also has a spiritual and emotional dimension to it. It's a sign of authority, it is a magical power, it's a sign of belonging as well to a family or particular group. It's a sign of allegiance between spouses or young lovers. And in the medieval mind, if you will, the ring is a sign, but it's also reality. In other words, the ring has real power over the world, and it's a way, if you will, to act in the world. So, in the excerpt that we've just seen, at the end of the day, there are two rings of interest here. We have the lady, who, as we saw and we heard, gave a ring to Lancelot. So this is Vivian, who raised Lancelot upon his father's death, raised him at the bottom of this lake, and introduced him to the art of chivalry. And the other one, his lady love, who, of course, the other lady is Guinevere, the Queen Guinevere, and who gave, as a guarantee of love, a ring to Lancelot. And at the end of the day, the Fay Morgana, who's jealous of this love, would steal that ring from the knight, replace it by a false ring, and have Guinevere believe that Lancelot has betrayed his love oath. All right, then, so to carry on then a little bit, if you will, with this particular story, what we see is that Lancelot ultimately will go back to the court, will meet up with Guinevere, and both will actually realize that there's been a trick played on them by Morgan the Fay. They've fallen into her trap, and here we see in this lovely miniature that's part of the French National Library here in its collection. What we see here is Guinevere and Lancelot, who are comparing their respective rings. The initial ring that Guinevere is holding, and then the false ring that was replaced by Morgan the Fay and that Lancelot is holding. Now, what's of interest here is that the artist of this picture has placed the rings right bang in the center of this composition to show how important it is to identify with the nature of these rings, because this identification plays a very important role in the reconciliation process among these lovers. And we see very clearly, I mean, we can imagine what comes next in this story, because here we're in the bedroom of Queen Guinevere. That's right. And if you do look at the diagonal, the rings are at the heart of the picture, as you say, and the bed will seal the reconciliation between the two lovers. At the end of the day, what we understand is that the ring at this particular time is what everybody's seeking for. It's the ultimate object of desire. When it is rolling around in the world, it's lost. When it's not worn, it's desired, it's hunted for, it's looked after. So it goes through 1,000 adventures, the ring. And the internal surface, if you will, is in the inside of beings. Love, in a word. And the external surface of the ring is referring to danger, evil spells, the adventures that it can encounter in terms of cruelties, illusions of the world, or it could be happiness that you may find in the company of this magic ring within this, medieval sphere. Now, what you've recalled is this duality between the internal and the external side, and the duality of the ring itself within these chivalric novels, because we have a ring rather which is magic, we have a love ring, and we have this idea in particular of the magic ring, as I say. And so this is linked with literature, obviously, because the analogy that we're going to be seeing right from the classical world is we have particular mention of this in Plato's Republic, when he refers to the ring of the Lydian king, Gizes. And this magic ring will come up again in the chivalric novels. Once again, we see this in Chrétien de Troyes' novel. With these divine adventures, we have this duality, and this magic ring will be very much interwoven with literature all the way through to the modern day, and even in the 19th century in England, the rediscovery of Middle Ages stories, which will be a source of inspiration for literature as a whole, both fantasy writing and heroic fantasy. In the 20th century, well, we'll see, as I say, heroic fantasy really getting off the ground. Some classics spring to mind. You can think of the Narnia Chronicles by C.S. Lewis, where we have a ring that enables you to move from one world to the next. That's the 1950s. 1950s, we also have a masterpiece of heroic fantasy literature, which obviously is The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. But let's return to this duality between magic ring and a love ring, because with Lancelot, in the excerpt at least that we heard a moment ago, there is genuinely this importance of the love ring, isn't there? Yes, that's right. The ring that you referred to, I mean, it's magic, is that it offers invisibility. So the person wearing the ring, if he turns the ring inside, the gem inside, then he becomes invisible to the eyes of others. And of course, in adventurous rings, this will play a key role, and wonderful things can happen. So, as you well know today, a ring materializes the links between lovers, people who are engaged, and the married couple. But over and beyond the loved person, the person with whom that you are engaged yourself. But the ring is a mark of our link with the world, with the universe. You engage with the world as a whole. And to hark back to the book, the link between the reader and the text, or between the author and the writer, or the director and the films. That also is built into a ring. All right, so a gem then, a gem which is part of this union, if I can rebound on that particular point, that is part and parcel of the amorous encounter. So if we can just dwell on an item of jewelry, Sylvie Corbelin here, a French creator. Here we see some earrings. And this pair of earrings illustrate the two protagonists here in the book by Madame Lafayette, written in 1678. Princess de Clèves is the title. And so we see her here. And on the other side, we have the Duc de Nemours' Duke, or the Duke of Nemours. So the princess here, as we see here, as she features here, she's wearing an ornament, a head covering, which is called an ferronnière. It's a type of feminine ornament which goes around your forehead. It can be a very fine gold chain or a silk cord, and it has a central gem. It could be a stone, it could be a pearl, it could be something else. But this item of jewelry is very in vogue, very characteristic during the Renaissance. So here we have an item of jewelry which really echoes with the time period of this particular account of this story by Madame de Lafayette in 1678. And we have this natural stone, this, we'll have the Baroque pearl, which reinforces this notion. They're very much used in putting together 16th century jewels. Now, if we just dwell on the characters, here we have a Princess de Clèves here, who seems to be adopting an attitude similar to one that we'll be seeing in the pages of the novel itself, written, as I say, by Madame de Lafayette, when Princess de Clèves is trying to, is struggling with her passion for the Duke of Nemours. So, to go more deeply in this analysis, I think it's worthwhile referring you to these earrings, therefore. The head, of course, will separate the two earrings, the head being the seat of reason. And of course, that's what Princess de Clèves, if you like, is all about. To not give in, to not give in to her lover, namely the Duke of Nemours. Yes, that's right. Amorous passion as against duty. And thinking about the writer, Madame de Lafayette. Now, Princess de Clèves is analysis novel, as it's termed in academic circles. But of course, that's a bit drab, but it's all about love. So we have less adventure and ups and downs, if you will. But the intensity and the complexity of the amorous sentiment is something which is of great interest for Madame Lafayette. And as you said, she was, Madame de Chartres, aged 14, comes to the court of Henry II in France and would meet, by coincidence, by fluke, would bump into the Prince of Cleves, who she would marry on the advice of her mother, although she would actually fall in love with the Duke of Nemours. So I think we need to dwell on the circumstances of this initial meeting between the future married couple, the Prince of Cleves and the future Princess of Cleves. So it happens in a jewelry shop where Prince of Cleves discovers his future wife, and he falls in love immediately. So, falls in love immediately, and this is what Madame Lafayette writes. I'm citing, of course, from the book. The day after she arrived, she went to match jewels with an Italian who dealt in them for everyone. This man had come from Florence with the Queen and had become so rich in his trade that his house seemed more like that of a great lord than that of a merchant. As she was there, the Prince of Cleves arrived. He was so struck by her beauty that he could not hide his surprise and remained so moved by her modest beauty, her modest air that he had noticed in her actions, that it can be said that from that very moment, he conceived for her, from that very moment, an extraordinary passion and esteem. All right, so listening to that excerpt, could we also make this link, the link between the Princess of Cleves and a jewel exhibited here, if you like? I mean, can we do that? Can we make that link? Well, we can do that, but I think it's absolutely crucial to make that link. The location of their encounter is absolutely crucial. And it's all about the creative spark in the novel. Henry II, fabulous parties, beautiful clothing, and you can see, this shine, this sheen, this luster of the day is part and parcel of the court, and the fact that the king wants a tournament so that we have a part of the lance of the Count of Montgomery would split off and kill Henry II. So Madame de Chartres was a shining among all the fires of these jewels. She is a gem among all these jewels, as I said, and so the historical backdrop to all this is such that Italian jewelry, supported by Catherine de Medicis, would very much set up shop in Paris, and I suppose we can go so far as to say that they earn a lot of money. So, right, we have this, but I think in the 16th and 17th century, it's worth remembering that we have goldsmiths and Italian goldsmiths and jewelry makers that will have royal privilege given to them. The Milerio family is a case in point. This family would arrive at the French court right at the beginning of the 16th century, and a few years later on, in 1613, the family will obtain a fantastic privilege from the regent, Marie de Medicis, who would be giving them affording them her protection, and to give them the right to exercise their mercantile practice in precious artifacts in Paris, but of course from one end of France to the next. And this is a vast privilege that will then give them vast success and the prestige, of course, in subsequent years. That's right, because, and of course, we're talking about the relationship between gems and literature. And it's in Italy, of course, that the La Pléiade will impose the sonnet, which will become the dominant form in French poetry. I suppose we could go as far as to say that sonnet and jewelry is very much part and parcel. Right, the sonnet and La Pléiade. I think also that means that we can think about Rémy Belleau in 1576. Love and new exchanges of precious jewels, Rémy Belleau wrote. Now, in that collection of poems, 1576, he gives a great sheen and shine to the French language, to refer to what we were saying a moment ago about Madame de Lafayette's writing. So this sheen, if you will, is very much part of what Belleau writes. And from one verse to the next, one line to the next in his poetry, he is going to accumulate gemstones, if you will. He will be setting up kind of an enumeration, will be offering a list, a profuse list, an accumulation. We see this very much with his writing. I mean, it's not specific to poetry, because we'll also find it elsewhere, irrespective of the literary genre. That's right. The rhythm of the list in the sentence is very important. It is demonstrative of the profusion, of the generosity of the poem, which just accumulates to become epic. And you also see this principle over and beyond the pages of literature. And there we get right to the beginnings of writing through catalogues that will be sold by Gersaint, Edmé François Gersaint, in the 18th century. And these catalogues make it possible to see what artifacts are up for sale, jewels that will be rolling around the world. In my example earlier on about the ring, we see them here in this catalogues. And we see here on this picture here, a list. This was an inheritance. An important individual had died, and these are the objects that would be auctioned. And just look at the one top of the list. We have a ring, an octagonal gem, and 4 diamonds. We have another precious ring in the second place, etc., etc. That's right. So here we have Edmé François Gersin, as you said. This is a major merchant in the Enlightenment, friend of Watteau. He sells pictures and other curiosities, and also research has been done on him by Guillaume Glorieux, and he was able to show how Gersin's role was so important in the art market. Gersin is somebody who used very bold commercial strategies, such as having auctions, holding auctions, and in doing that, he'll be developing an unprecedented genre, the reasoned rational catalogue. Now, what's this? Well, it's a kind of an instructional manual, basically, where you'll find biographies of the artists, you'll find information about techniques, about the historic underlying of the artifacts, and the materials that the artifacts are made out of. So this new type of document is somewhere where we see a list, an accumulation, a profusion, an abundance, if you like, which links into this idea of something wondrous. And there's something wondrous about reading this list. Yes, and as we see in modern-day magazines or in auction magazines or things of that type, we can see that people will be bringing to the fore a fabulous object. And Gersin, he would show the engraving, just like a photographer would do in modern day. Now, what's of interest here, I think, is the description that Gersin does in this rational, reasoned catalogue. Gets stumped, if you will, because just today, we photograph jewels, and we have them feature in auction catalogues. But Gersin will be offering here to publish, to engrave and publish this decoration, these artifacts in real life, at scale 1:1. So we actually see how big or small it is. And so here we see something which is 18th century, very much part and parcel of the taste of the day. We have a necklace, we have a pair of earrings, etc. And in the text, we see that these gems are cut Indian fashion. So this is redolent of India, this reference made to India, which echoes with the fact that in the 18th century, there'll be lots of commercial ties revolving around precious stones with India, between France and India. We're thinking, you can think about the trader and merchant Jean-Baptiste Tavernier. Yes, right. Since you're mentioning Tavernier, and of course through him, it's an entire world of discovery, of adventure that comes all the way through to the modern day, because it's very much part of a novel itself. So perhaps not to focus on the West Indies. Tavernier was an expert of that, but perhaps more modestly and more closer to home. What about England? England, where D'Artagnan, the knight D'Artagnan, would leap onto his horse and ride to in Alexandre Dumas's famous novel, The Three Musketeers. Yes, of course, we can dwell on that classic in French literature. But before we do that, perhaps I can suggest that we look at one of the protagonists in Alexandre Dumas' novel, Anne of Austria. We see her here, painted by Rubens. So she is wearing a diamond and pearl jewelry, and around her waist we can see a knot, a cloth knot, a fabric knot, and we can see that it's it is terminated by metal features, which are all part and parcel of the plot in Alexander Dumas's novel. So this type of decorative object, something that can be metal, precious metal, or in base metal, it's something that can be decorated with pearls, diamonds, or by enamel. We see this here in this in René Lalique here on the right, a Renaissance style. And this is an object which is functional as well, because these ferrets are a metallic item which will offer a completion of a lace to make it easier for feeding the lace through a loophole. So it's functional. We'll see this in the Middle Ages. It's also used in the Renaissance. And from the 17th century, we have an ornament which will become more decorative than functional. And when Anne of Austria died, there was an inventory made. In 1666, it was discovered that she had a dozen or so of these items, particularly in gold and steel. There's no mention of diamond artifacts of this type. And Dumas's text offers, therefore, even greater fascination and mystery surrounding these diamond objects that the Queen may have worn. That's right, and this is all, as I said, part of at the heart really of this adventure, and it's all part of D'Artagnan's search, who goes to England. And this, of course, appeared in a serial format in 1844 in Dumas's novels. You have to captivate the reader and renew his interest every morning. And so obviously there'll be lots of, be a rock and roll, a roller coaster ride to capture the interest of the reader. So in this book, we'll see that D'Artagnan will try to retrieve these items that Anne of Austria has lost by giving them to the Duke of Buckingham, whereas the King of France himself had given them to her as a gift. And so Cardinal de Richelieu, through his spies, Cardinal de Richelieu is going to try to pose problems between her and the king, and suggests to the Queen that she should be wearing that very jewel at the ball. So it's a machination that is set up, a trap here. So, Madam, he said majestically, there will be shortly a ball at the Hotel de Ville. My intention is that to do honor to our brave aldermen, you should appear there in formal dress, and above all, adorned with these diamond artifacts that I have given you for your party. Here is my answer. The answer was terrible. Anne of Austria thought that Louis XIII knew everything. Do you hear, madam, said the king, who was enjoying this embarrassment to the full, but without guessing the cause. Do you hear? Yes, sire, I hear, stammered the queen. Will you be appearing at this ball? Yes, sire. With your earrings? With these artifacts? Yes, I will. So you will appear? Yes, sire. That's good, said the king as he withdrew. That's good. I'm counting on it. The queen curtsied, less out of etiquette than because her knees were buckling under her. So in the face of the misfortune that threatened her, she burst into tears. All right, then. So with this exit, he can only be sensitive to her sense of despondency, the queen here, Anne of Austria. It's an extract which helps us understand to what extent the gems are so important, and these particular jewels are important in this narrative structure. It helps us understand why Dumas's novel has been adapted so much and be brought to the silver screen. This brings us back to cinema, doesn't it? And I suppose what's interesting here, among all these various cinema adaptations, these artifacts are never shown very precisely, because in the 1948 version with Lana Turner and Gene Kelly, here we have buttons or brooches in diamonds. And then, of course, in the more recent version of Martin Bourboulon, I think that it's a necklace, I think. Anyway, we can see that this object is important in Dumas's novel, but they're never really shown as they are. But, you know, there is a proposal for reconstituting these items of decoration put together by Stéphane Marant, who is an expert in reconstituting historic decorations, jewels. The Empress Josephine's pearl necklaces was done by him, but also the famous Marie Antoinette necklace, which refers again to, in fact, to a Dumas, another Dumas novel. And actually, you can see these reconstitutions, at the Chateau of Monte Cristo, which you'll see in Marly, which is the former house, in actual fact, of Alexander Dumas, the writer. Yes, and in fact, if we can play on words, well, this is all about literature, but I suppose even without knowing or even having an idea of what this artifact is, the reader is still locked in, not into a locket, but into the lock of this interest of the book. Anyway, in the 19th century, the historical novel, which is, the century of progress, of bourgeois society, of industrial modernization of France. So the historic novel resuscitates the gem in the past, but at the same time, we have major writers. There's a major literary movement in Montparnasse, which will show great interest in contemporary jewels, to the extent, in fact, that they have an aesthetic. They want poetry to be a jewel itself, not only draw inspiration from a gem or a jewel, where you can describe these fabulous, precious objects, but in and of itself, if you will, it becomes, the writing itself becomes in and of itself a jewel. And this Parnassian movement is taken over, if you will, by decadent literature, by fin de siècle, end of century, if you will, literature, as we'll see in this next extract that Charline is going to be reading, Arabors by Joris Carol Huysmans in 1884, which is Huysmans is one of the founding fathers of this decadent literary movement, where we see Salome dancing, who's just discovered, because it's Gustave Moreau painting featuring in the Salon in 1876. So I read. Bracelets, rings and belts are bursting with triumphant sparks. Her triumphant gown seamed with pearls, streaked with silver, laminated with gold. The goldsmith's breastplate, each stitch is a stone, burst into flames, crossing fiery serpents, swarming over the matte-colored flesh, over the tea-pink skin, like splendid insects with dazzling elytra, marbled with carmine, dotted with royal yellow, etc., etc. So what's of interest here is that with this excerpt from Huysmans's novel Arabors, as you'll appreciate, we're far from the adventures of Dumas, and we're far also, I would say, from Zola's naturalism that Huysmans feels an affinity to in his initial writing, at least, in his early writing. But here we see a manifesto, an anti-social, if you will, and a manifesto, because Arabors, this novel, is something where absolutely nothing happens. It's all about description. The chapters come and go, and all through these chapters, you'll see descriptions of interior decorations, of Fontenay-aux-Roses, that house, or, where Jean de Essant goes, a dandy, anti-hero, and he'll go to that house, withdraw into that house to really enjoy the treasures of that house in his library and his perfume collection, his flower collection, and his very rare and old engravings, and particularly one by Gustave Moreau, who, which he describes in that chapter. So this idea of dance and Salome here evokes other dances in literature in the second half of the 19th century. That's right. I mean, one of the dominant figures in that period is Salome. Salome's dance to wake up the old Herod's sensitivity. So we see this motif, this dance motif, in Charles Baudelaire's Fleur du Mal, where I have the erotic poem called The Jewels, which was condemned in the law courts, in fact, and was forbidden in Les Fleurs du Mal, his anthology. And Baudelaire, in actual fact, rails against this pretty object, this finished artifact, rounded off in perfect. For Baudelaire, a woman is either sculptural, like of ancient Venus statue, and afterwards, after the Fleur du Mal, will become the femme fatale, a morbid creature, if you will, in decadent literature. And Rimbaud, of course, was one of the major representatives of that movement. That's right, morbidity and artifice. And I think with those two points in mind, we can dwell on a chapter from Arabor, talking about a living tortoise that de Essayist wants to turn into a gigantic jewel. Essayist, this character, the leading character, wants to decorate the shell, basically, of the tortoise, wants to set fabulous gems in that shell to make it link in with his carpet. And so Huysmans then lists all this, and we'll get back to this list, this profusion, this abundance of exceptional gems. Just remember that Jean des Essayist, this main character, will be going off to choose, very, very carefully, the various precious stones with which he wishes to decorate this animal's shell. And he'll set aside those gems that for him are a bit too straight-laced, a bit too conventional. Rubies, sapphires, emeralds, and diamonds, because he wants to really home in on items that he describes as virile, green asparagus or green pear. So it's eccentric and extravagant. And we all know full well, really, that the tortoise of Jean des Essayist would end up dying under the weight of all these stones on its back, just like Jean-Baptiste, in fact, who would die in Salome's dance. John the Baptist, rather. Yeah, Huysmans goes too far, really. And it's this overabundancy in decadent literature which is characteristic of it. He goes right to the end of this fascination, if you will. And his love in overdoing it, if you will, is something that's of great interest in Arabors and is captivating in his novel. But the paradox, I would say, is that basically at the end of the 19th century, on the one hand, we've got literature which shows great interest in the minerality of what's rare, of the density of an exceptional word, just like the minerality itself of the stone. But it's looking for this rigidity of the precious word that is just as precious as the gem, which are very much present in the text itself. So we have this search, this passion, if you will, for literature of a rare text on the one hand, and of course, on the other hand, in the world of jewelry, a gemstone which will leap, which will disdain its own weight, the apparent opulence of the gem, to turn into a dragonfly, a fluttering butterfly, or this fabulous animal by Lalique. And of course, we're talking about the color of mortidity here, which is very much linked with end of century themes: death of John the Baptist, death of the tortoise, that we find also in some objects featured at this period in the world of jewelry. All right, we're going to be reaching almost the end of our journey together, traversing time and stones, and on the back of literature, if you will. But we did want to dwell on an example from the 20th century. And to do just that, we're going to be drawing an extract from a poem by Louis Aragon called The Eyes of Elsa, Elsa's Eyes, which is part of the poem, rather, corrects the speaker, is called Elsa Waltzes. This is a collection that was brought out in 1942. The Eyes of Elsa is the title of the collection. Let me read what Louis Aragon tells us about this. You made jewelry for the city and the evening. Everything turned into necklaces in your opera hands, pieces of rag and pieces of mirror, necklaces as beautiful as glory, beautiful beyond belief. Elsa waltzes and will waltz. I was going to sell to dealers in New York and elsewhere, from Berlin to Rio, to Milan, to Ankara. These jewels made of nothing under your gold-digging fingers, these pebbles that seemed like flowers, wearing your colors. Elsa waltzes and will waltz. Yes, as you've just recalled, Louis Aragon is paying tribute to the twofold dimension of Elsa Triollet. She was a writer, she was a poet, but also at the end of 1920 and the beginning of the 1930s, for 2 or 3 years, would leave her pen to one side to devote herself to designing, creating fashionable jewels for some big names in the luxury world. That's right. And you know, we can urge you to look at an article which is devoted to Elsa Triollet in the digital dossier, Jewels and Literature, on the French National Library, the BNF's website, that I referred to, that was referred to in the introductory comment. And what's of interest here is that we can see something made by Elsa Triollet. We can see a necklace, and we see the motif here of the rose that she is actually wearing. In the right-hand image we have of her in the form of a brooch. So this is a motif that will be with Elsa Triollet, with her jewelry creation, but also in her literary production, particularly with Rose à Crédit that she wrote in 1959, but also we have the rose, which will become an emblem of the writer herself when Agnès Varda dedicated to her a short film in 1966, which is called Elsa the Rose. So there we have it. We have roses in literature, we have roses in jewels. So we wanted to finish on that note, on that figure, the writer and jewelry maker, who embodies beautifully these two dimensions of creation: jewelry on the one side, and of course art and literature on the other. All right, then. So before we move on to the 1 or 2 questions that we may have gathered, so what's happening now at the school? Well, the next conference, which will take place, it will take place on the Friday, the 28th of June. It'll be devoted to the emerald in Asia, from myth to reality. That's the title. And obviously, you can keep abreast of what's going on with the school on its various campuses in Paris, Hong Kong, Shanghai, and of course, Dubai. All right, perhaps we can take 1 or 2 questions, because I think we're slightly slipping over time. All right, then we have a question. Are there links of friendship or clientele swap-overs between writers and jewelry artists in the 19th century. Yes, absolutely. There were friendship among customers of these jewelers. If you think about the first half of the 19th century, at least, Honoré de Balzac is a case in point, and Eugène Sue, who wrote The Mysteries of Paris, who exchanged letters with a major goldsmith and jeweler in the Romantic period. We have a full series of letters between the two men, between Eugène Sue and Froment Maurice, this gentleman, the jeweler, and also with Balzac. And Eugène Sue would compare, in actual fact, Froment Maurice, the jeweler, this goldsmith, with Benvenuto Celli, who is the major goldsmith in the Renaissance, a period during which, well, in fact, we discover his memoirs of that Renaissance jeweler in the 1930s, and that great interest among writers. And Froment Maurice is really placed on a pedestal. And then perhaps another example, this one from the end of the 19th century, where we see customers such as Montesquieu and Lalique. Montesquieu would in fact dedicate one of his poems to René Lalique, a poem on an opal, a stone that Lalique, it really features very much in his end-of-century compositions. And you think about friendship links or customer links in the 20th century, well, perhaps I can ask you to go and look at the digital dossier, Jewels and Literature, on the French National Library website, the BNF, because there is an article devoted to that very point. So there we have it. Is there another question? All right, the digital dossier on the French National Library is interested only in French literature, and which literature is really focused upon? Well, yes, this digital dossier that we have on the website, the BNF, or French National Library website, this is a dossier which does bring to the fore French literature, because we have a huge archive, basically, in the library's collection, in its archives. So, but we have tried to have our readers go beyond France's borders, one or two excursions into the English-speaking world's literature. We've also addressed some Italian writers, such as Annunzio, Gabriel D'Annunzio. We also go off to the United States with Clifford Barney, Natalie Clifford Barney, or Edith Wharton, United States and Canada. So more so immersive recordings, tales and fairy tales for children, taken from around the world. So we've really tried to have literature emerge from all across the globe, even though there is this French weighting. So we did want to leverage all literary forms as well: poems, myths, novels, short stories. We even looked at letters among writers and memoirs as well. Any other question? No, I can't see any. So, all right. So we're absolutely delighted to share this moment with you, and we hope very much that we've whetted your appetite to dive into these classics of literature, and hopefully that's your feeling. So we've fulfilled our contracts, if you will. So anyway, I urge you very warmly to discover that digital dossier, literature and jewels, which will offer you many interlinkages into the matters we've already addressed ourselves in this hour's conference. Thanks very much, and hope to see you soon. Goodbye.